Tonight on Primetime, time is running out on President Trump's threatening deadline to Iran. But Tehran has rejected a temporary ceasefire proposal favoring a permanent end to the war. Another deadline looms while the world hopes for peace. Good evening. Tensions between Washington and Tehran are intensifying, with both sides hardening their positions as diplomatic efforts come under strain. Here's how the situation is escalating and what it could mean moving forward.
Tensions between the United States and Iran are sharply escalating. US President Donald Trump says Iran can be taken out in one night and has set a deadline for Tehran to agree to a deal or face what he calls complete demolition.
We have a plan, because of the power of our military, where every bridge in Iran will be decimated by 12 o'clock tomorrow night, where every power plant in Iran will be out of business, burning, exploding, and never to be used again. I mean, complete demolition by 12 o'clock. And it'll happen over a period of 4 hours if we wanted to.
At the center of the standoff is a US proposal aimed at ending the conflict between Washington and Tehran. Washington had sent a 15-point plan demanding Iran limit its nuclear ambitions and reopen the Strait of Hormuz, a critical route for global energy supplies. But Tehran has rejected that proposal. Trump says the deadline he set for Tuesday is final and will not be extended, calling Iran's response a significant step, but not good enough.
Where we're doing unbelievably well, well at a level that nobody's ever seen before. The entire country can be taken out in one night, and that night might be tomorrow night.
The threat has further raised tensions with Iran, accusing the United States of mixing diplomacy with military pressure. Officials in Tehran say talks cannot move forward under these conditions.
Iran should not hesitate in defending its country because of any so-called deadline. The reason we do not accept a ceasefire is based on past experience. A ceasefire means a brief respite, allowing the other side to strengthen its forces and commit more crimes afterward. No reasonable person would do that. Our demand is to end this imposed war and ensure that the cycle of ceasefire and war does not repeat.
Iran says its position is based on national security and the demands of its people. Meanwhile, Washington signals it is ready to act if no agreement is reached. With the deadline approaching, the risk now is that tensions could escalate even further.
Meanwhile, the Israeli military has issued a warning to people inside Iran, urging them to avoid trains and railway lines, saying doing so could endanger their lives. In a message, the military said people should refrain from using rail transport until further notice.
Well, in Tehran, public sentiment is hardening as tensions with the United States continue to rise. Here's a closer look at how people on the ground are responding.
In the heart of Tehran, the streets reflect a strong sense of defiance. Murals of past leaders, portraits of Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei, and anti-US slogans underline public support for the government's stance on the Strait of Hormuz. While some dissenting voices remain, many Iranians continue to back their leadership amid ongoing tensions involving Iran, Israel, and the United States. The remarks come ahead of a looming deadline set by US President Donald Trump. President Masoud Pezeshkian said more than 14 million citizens are ready to defend the country, adding that he too is prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice for its future. Many residents dismiss US threats as ineffective and support the government's decision to keep the strait closed, as well as its rejection of a US-backed proposal for a temporary ceasefire.
If the US were capable of carrying out such an action, it would have done so on the very first day. There would have been no need for threats. So you can be sure it refrains precisely because it understands the psychological burden such a move could trigger from countries around the world. Our armed forces have already demonstrated in previous rounds of attacks that in response to any strike on our infrastructure, we retaliated threefold. For every act of aggression, we delivered a counterstrike.
Other Tehran residents expressed a mix of caution and defiance.
I think it has already carried out every act of brutality it could. That is, I doubt there was more brutality it could have done before. Iran's response must be the complete removal of Israel in general, so that not even a single house remains here. All of Israel must be removed, and likewise the US should no longer have any bases around us.
Cars and billboards fill the cityscape, mirroring a public determined to reject external pressure and defend the country's strategic positions.
Well, Tehran says it has finalised its response to a US proposal to end the war and passed it to Pakistan to relay to Washington. Touraj Shirililo reports.
Iran said it has drafted its counter-proposal to a US 15-point plan to bring an end into the ongoing war and forwarded it to neighboring Pakistan as the mediator to be communicated to the US officials. According to the state-owned IRNA news agency, the 10-point response roundly rejects the US proposal for a ceasefire based on past experiences, and instead calls for a complete end to the war, which was imposed on Iran on 28th of February amid nuclear talks. It also said that Tehran has laid out its demands on how to end the war, including a cessation of hostilities in all fronts across the region, a protocol for safe transit through the Strait of Hormuz, the issue of war damages, and the removal of economic sanctions. As the war continues into its second month, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi held a phone contact with Qatari Foreign Minister Mohammed Al Thani on latest regional developments, also discussing the Tehran-Doha bilateral ties. Official news media quoted him stressing that Tehran is entitled to the right of targeting US bases and interests in the region, including in Qatar, which Araghchi said are misused to attack Iran. Meantime, head of Atomic Energy Organization of Iran, Mohammad Islami, in a letter to Director General of International Atomic Energy Agency, Rafael Grossi, said the UN watchdog's lack of action has heartened Israel and US to attack the Bushehr nuclear power plant as well as the civilian nuclear facilities under UN verification. It is the 39th day of war, and Iran's military officials, including a spokesman for Revolutionary Guards Khatam al-Anbiya Central Command, Ebrahim Zulfaqari, have warned of crushing retaliatory response if attacks on civilian targets are repeated, following US President Donald Trump's threat of bombing Iran's non-military infrastructure on Tuesday. Touraj Shirililo, Tehran, Foreign News.
Well, to help us unpack what this could mean, I'm joined in the studio now by our very own Andy Mioch, who's been closely following developments. Andy, very good to see you. Just help us, bring us up to speed, if you could, on the very latest. What are you hearing from both sides, both from Washington and Tehran at this point?
Well, we've seen quite a dramatic social media post by the US President Donald Trump, who said that a civilization will die tonight. That's quite a sentence. He also said he does not want that to happen, but that it probably will happen. In that same post, Trump goes on to say that a complete and total regime change has happened, and he wonders aloud whether, quote, revolutionary, wonderful things might happen. We also heard from the United States Vice President J.D. Vance, who's in Hungary. He's there. He met Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban in a show of support for Hungary's Prime Minister ahead of the April general elections in that Central European country. Vance said that military objectives in Iran have been largely accomplished, that the U.S. feels confident it can get a response from Iran by that deadline that Donald Trump said. He also said Iranians were slow negotiators before the war, and that they still remain slow negotiators. There's one other thing that he said. He said that the United States has not used all the tools from its toolkit, and
that, paired with that Trump's threat of ending a civilization, sparked some speculation that the United States might even deploy a nuclear weapon. That prompted the White House to deny that the president is thinking of using such a weapon. As for the Iranians, President Masoud Pezeshkian took to the social media today, where he wrote that more than 14 million Iranians have so far, quote, registered to sacrifice their lives to defend Iran, adding he's also devoted to giving his for the country. We've also heard from Iran's ambassador to Pakistan, the country which is mediating these indirect talks between the United States and Iran, Reza Amiri Moghadam. He said that Pakistan's endeavors to stop the war are approaching, quote, critical sensitive stage when it comes to the mediator Islamabad. According to a Reuters report, Pakistani officials have confirmed that efforts to facilitate talks between Washington and Tehran are ongoing. The news agency also carried a quote from an unnamed Pakistani security official saying that Islamabad will stand with Saudi Arabia under their defense pact if the conflict escalates. Just for a quick piece of context, that defense agreement signed in September last year says that any attack on one country will be treated as an attack on both.
I mean, extraordinary, ominous language, to say the least, from President Trump. In terms of the deadline, as the US would put it, the so-called deadline, as the Iranians would put it, what more do we know about that at this point? And also the response from the Iranians to that statement by Trump?
Well, Trump's deadline to Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz or face strikes on its power plants and other infrastructure, including bridges, expires at 8 p.m. Eastern time, or as we're speaking right now, in about 8 hours. The US president has previously set multiple deadlines that have since passed, have shifted, and so on. He was asked on the legality of such strikes, those on power plants, bridges, and so on. Both Trump and the White House later dismissed concerns regarding those attacks. Rather, would they constitute a possible war crime? Just a side note, a spokesperson for the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres told the Associated Press on Monday that international law bars attacks on such infrastructure. There's a quote here. The spokesperson said that even if specific civilian infrastructure were to qualify as a military objective, an attack would still be prohibited if it risks excessive incidental civilian harm. Now, Iran has been defiant with its embassies across the globe, openly mocking Trump's threats so far. Just yesterday, Iran's state news agency IRNA reported that Iran rejected a temporary ceasefire offer, as we heard in the introductory package. They are seeking a permanent end to the war. Tehran has sent its own 10-point proposal to the Americans via Islamabad. The Reuters reported, citing a senior Iranian official, that Iran has set preconditions for talks on lasting peace with the United States, including an immediate halt to all strikes, guarantees that attacks will not be repeated, and compensation for war damage. They added that a permanent deal should allow Iran to demand fees for ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz in the future.
And Andy, we've heard some dramatic language on one side, some less dramatic language, frankly, on the other. When you look at how both sides have been framing this situation, has that shifted at all recently?
Donald Trump said yesterday at the White House, when asked on that 10-point peace plan that Iran has sent the way of Americans, he said that the proposal is a significant step, but that it's not good enough. Axios later reported, carrying a quote of an unnamed US official who saw that Iranian proposal, saying that the proposal is maximalist. In another Reuters report just a couple of hours ago, a senior Iranian official said that Iran and the US will continue to exchange messages through Pakistan, but that Tehran will not show any flexibility as long as Washington continues to demand, as he put it, surrender under pressure. That same source said Qatar had conveyed Tehran's message to the US and regional countries. If Washington attacks Iran's power plants, the entire region and Saudi Arabia will, quote, fall into complete darkness with Iran's retaliatory strikes. He also warned that if the situation gets out of control, Iran's allies will also close the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. Now, that strait is on the opposite end of the Arabian Peninsula. It connects the Bay of Aden with the Red Sea, and it's off the coast of Yemen, and we know who Iran's allies there are, the Houthi rebels. It goes without saying that that blockade would just add to already severely disrupted global supply chains with the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz.
Andy, we've heard already from a diverse group of citizens on the ground in Tehran. What developments on the ground at this point are causing the most concern?
Well, as these 11th hour negotiations are underway, missiles continue flying overhead in Iran, in Israel, in the Gulf. Just an hour ago, we heard from Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announcing that Israel attacked railroads and bridges across Iran, claiming that the infrastructure was used by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The IRGC, for its part, warned the neighboring countries that restraint is over following Trump's threat on hitting Iran's energy infrastructure. There's the US conducting strikes on more than 50 military targets on Harg Island, that crucial oil export hub of Iran, according to two US officials cited by the Wall Street Journal. Heavy bombings were also reported in Tehran. There were sirens in Israel, attacks in Lebanon, and attacks on Gulf countries. As things stand right now, the death toll has risen to more than 1,900 people in Iran and more than 1,500 people in Lebanon, with a note that Tehran has not updated its official toll for days now. And according to a tally by the Associated Press, more than 24 people have died in Gulf Arab states and the Israeli-occupied West Bank. 23 have been reported dead in Israel, and 13 US service members have been killed. And millions of people in Iran and Lebanon have been displaced.
Yeah, that's it. Ominous times indeed, Andy. I know that across all A News platforms, we'll be keeping people up to date as that deadline approaches and beyond. We thank you very much for coming in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, after the break, we'll take a look at the top business news stories of the day with Katie Wilson. Stay tuned.
Defense technologies, artificial intelligence, and digital security are advancing rapidly on an international scale.
Avelsan has designed and delivered simulators of numerous military aircrafts, helicopters, and aerial platforms. From airports to stadiums, hospitals to factories, wherever video meets complexity, we add intelligence. In short, we do not merely manage videos, we turn video into decisions that protect people, assets, and cities.
Today, we will be discussing these AI initiatives, international collaborations, and future technological objectives.
A warm welcome back wherever you're watching Primetime. Now, Katie Wilson has joined us. She's got the very latest business news stories. Katie, what's on your agenda tonight?
Well, Guy, there's some worrying news coming out of Brazil in regards to modern slavery allegations. We're going to have more on that and the latest from the Middle East and the far side of the moon. So let's get started. We begin this evening with a concerning report from Brazil where authorities have added Chinese automaker BYD to a registry of employers linked to conditions resembling modern slavery. The move follows allegations of human trafficking and worker abuse in 2024. The company denies wrongdoing, so let's take a look.
Brazil has placed China's BYD on a list of employers who have subjected workers to conditions similar to slavery. This comes after a 2024 scandal where Chinese workers were said to have been victims of human trafficking and abusive contracts. Jinjiang Group, the contractor the BYD used to hire the workers cited in the scandal, has denied the claims. BYD has previously said that it had no knowledge of any violations until local media reported the scandal. Still, Brazilian officials argue that the automaker should be responsible for its workers' conditions. Being on the list carries further reputational risk for BYD in its biggest market after China. It also bars the company from obtaining some loans from Brazilian banks, but does not affect the operation of its local auto plant. Companies can avoid being included in the list by signing a deal with the government, committing to change their practices and compensate affected workers. Firms are only added to the list after all possibilities of appeal are exhausted at the government level. After a company is added, it stays on the list for 2 years, barring a court decision to remove it. BYD did not reply to a request for comment.
Over now to the war in the Middle East, where Iran's effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz is reshaping global energy markets. Analysis reveals sharp divisions among Gulf producers, with some profiting from soaring prices, whilst others face heavy losses as exports are disrupted.
Iran's effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz has created both winners and losers across the Gulf. Reuters' analysis shows Iran, Oman and Saudi Arabia are benefiting from the surging prices and alternative export routes, while Iraq, Kuwait and Qatar are losing billions as their shipments are choked. The divide comes down to geography and infrastructure. Iran controls the choke point. Saudi Arabia, the UAE and Oman can bypass it via pipelines and ports. Iraq, Kuwait and much of Qatar's oil and gas cannot. Benchmark Brent crude was up about 60% in March. That was as the war entered its second month. For Saudi Arabia, higher prices mean increased royalties and taxes from state oil giant Aramco. It's overwhelmingly owned by the government and its sovereign wealth fund. Aramco declined to comment when asked about Reuters' calculations. Representatives for the other countries or their oil companies did not immediately respond to requests for comment. The kingdom's biggest pipeline is the 746-mile east-west link. It connects eastern oil fields to the Red Sea port of Yanbu. But experts warn the advantage is vulnerable to further strikes by Iran or Yemen's Houthis. Iraq and Kuwait were hit hardest, with estimated monthly revenues down by about 3/4 versus a year earlier. Qatar's liquefied natural gas is also trapped, helping push global gas markets higher. Buyers using bypass routes face soaring freight rates and war risk premiums, piling costs onto crude. For the longer term, however, the impact is unclear. Some oil companies and politicians in the West have lobbied for increased investment in fossil fuels to try to protect against supply shocks. But some analysts say renewable energy provides the best protection.
While staying with the Middle East conflict, the International Monetary Fund is warning the war will drive up inflation and slow global growth. Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva says energy shocks and supply disruptions are being felt worldwide, with fresh economic forecasts due next week. Let's see what she had to say.
Had we not have this war, we would have seen one small upgrade of our growth projections. Instead, all roads now lead to higher prices and slower growth. Oil supply has shrunk by 13%. So we have a significant impact from oil, from gas, and from the interruption of supply chains from fertilizers to helium. Second, the impact is global. Everybody around the planet feels it. Energy importers feel it a lot. Now, even energy exporters, countries in the Gulf, Iraq, they also feel the impact.
Well, one industry that isn't feeling the burden quite so much is China's electric vehicle sector. As oil prices surge due to the Middle East conflict, the country's rapid shift to EVs is helping cushion the impact, reducing reliance on imported crude and shielding part of its economy from the shock.
As fuel prices rise due to the war in Iran, China's rapid shift to electric vehicles is paying dividends. At this fleet depot in Hebei province, truck drivers say switching to EVs has helped to cushion price hikes.
Once war breaks out, oil gets expensive and prices rise right away. But with electric vehicles, electricity prices more or less stay the same. Even if they change, it's only by a small amount.
It's a sentiment shared by this taxi driver in the city. She says EVs are a bit more expensive upfront, but cheap charging makes them more economical over time. China hasn't been immune to war shocks, with oil prices surging after Iran moved to close the critical Strait of Hormuz shipping route. Beijing still relies heavily on imported crude, with road transport one of the main sources of demand. But its total EV fleet is now about the size of the rest of the world's combined. And Economist Intelligence Unit analyst Chim Lee says the trend of electric vehicle adoption will dampen the country's reliance on oil.
So the auto sector accounts for about 40% of China's oil consumption. And over the last decade, what we have seen is that gradually EVs actually start to account for about more than half of passenger vehicle sales. What that means is that oil consumption in China, coming from road transport is actually going to be, not leading the growth anymore.
Lee said China was now one of the world's most resilient economies in the face of oil shocks. Besides the boost from EVs, it's helped by factors including a pipeline network that reduces its dependence on seaborne supplies of energy.
Staying in China, we have a special report from the country's manufacturing sector, where firms are reassessing global supply chains after US tariffs. Despite pressure to relocate, one electronics maker says China remains difficult to replace, highlighting its deep industrial base even amid ongoing trade tensions. Let's take a look.
After Donald Trump's imposition of tariffs last year, electronics maker Agilian Technology saw its US orders frozen for months. Many clients canceled purchases, while some demanded that the company set up production outside China. As Beijing retaliated, escalations pushed the levies above 100% on both sides. Back then, the company found a factory to partner with in Malaysia, was in the midst of setting up a facility in India, and even looked at moving production to the US. But it found foreign supply chains were incomplete, leaving it stuck with tariffed Chinese components and higher labor costs in the overseas factories. Then a Washington-Beijing deal removed most of the levies imposed. Now Agilian has decided to press ahead with setting up some facilities outside China as insurance against future turmoil. But it's found that overseas operations take way longer to do anything compared with China. And Chief Executive Fabienne Gasorg says the cost and quality of Chinese components also make having a base there more indispensable than ever.
We are changing the world from a free trade system somehow to a multi-tariff situation where having tariff is not only about 5%, 7% something, but more like 10, 50, 100 as it fits their business. So this is the trend we are going there. However, on our side, we see China as the trend that built China for electronic products is just incredible. A typical example is the capability to develop electronic components, which was very weak before, but now they start to have very strong electronic industries, microelectronics, so to developing chips, which is a very future-proof.
Now, Trump is set to visit China in May, against a backdrop of new uncertainty sparked by the Iran war. Georg isn't optimistic that the visit will produce a breakthrough.
I don't think that Trump will come here, but he will come here will change much, but he will try to push more his strategies anyways, that for sure, and try to bring more instabilities as obviously used to do.
Deal or no deal, however, Julian says customers have stopped asking about shifting production overseas. In the end, a year of Trump's tariffs has done nothing to dent this firm's commitment to China.
And finally, whilst we've all been keeping an eye on Artemis 2, Elon Musk's SpaceX has unveiled plans for its record-breaking IPO, set to include an unprecedented share for retail investors. This gives everyday people, maybe with a bit of cash in their pocket, a chance to invest in the future of space travel.
And liftoff. Go.
SpaceX outlined details of its highly anticipated initial public offering at a meeting with its team of bankers Monday night, telling them it plans to set aside a large portion of shares for retail investors. According to two sources, Chief Financial Officer Brett Johnson told the bankers that retail participation will be a critical part of the IPO and a bigger share than any IPO in history. He said the approach is intentional, aimed at recognizing people that have been incredibly supportive of the company and its founder, Elon Musk. Reuters reported last month that SpaceX is rewriting the IPO playbook with the large retail portion in the offering. The IPO is expected to be the largest ever. The rocket maker is seeking to raise $75 billion, a move that could value the company at up to $1.75 trillion. The firm is set to begin its investor roadshow the week of June 8th, when executives and bankers start presenting the deal. On June 11th, it expects to host about 1,500 retail investors at what sources described as a major investor event. Everyday retail investors in the US, UK, EU, Australia, Canada, Japan, and Korea would get the opportunity to take part, a source said. The final structure of the deal, including the size of the retail allocation, is expected to be determined closer to the IPO launch. The sources also said SpaceX plans to make its IPO prospectus public in late May. The company did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Morgan Stanley, Bank of America, Citigroup, JP Morgan, and Goldman Sachs are leading the deal, along with 16 other banks.
There we have it. That's your business news roundup for the day. Back to you, Guy. Are you following the whole Artemis 2 journey?
Do you know, Katie, in our house, we've been absolutely glued to it. And I was lucky enough to interview 4 astronauts recently on a special we did that aired last weekend. And one of the things that fascinates me about people that have seen Earth from space is it does seem to sort of change their perspective on conflict and peace and things like that. How about you? Have you been watching it?
Absolutely, yeah. It's all very inspiring, isn't it, to see women just travel to the far side of the moon. And yeah, I'm sure it'll have a big impact for generations to come.
Still quite pricey to go as a tourist, though.
Yeah, need a few pounds in your pocket, I think.
Katie, thank you very much. Okay, after the break, we'll be having a guest on who is a counter-terrorism expert. He's going to join us to give us his view on the recent attack in Istanbul. Do stay with us. On World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption.
As America sleeps, Europe is waking, and the East has begun its day. A News is right here at the center, bringing you the latest stories as they break. I'm Nadia Jani, here with you each weekday morning to share latest world news and the stories shaping our region. Across all platforms and wherever you get your news, we explore the context behind the big headlines. Live from Baku, I bring you a diverse mix of regional and international news, sport and politics for you, an audience that wants a bit more. So join me Monday to Friday for the latest headlines, expert analysis and live updates from around the world. Around the globe and live from Baku, this is Daybreak here on A News.
Defense technologies, artificial intelligence, and digital security are advancing rapidly on an international scale.
Avelsan has designed and delivered simulators of numerous military aircrafts, helicopters, and aerial platforms. From airports to stadiums, hospitals to factories, wherever video meets complexity, we add intelligence. In short, we do not merely manage videos, we turn video into decisions that protect people, assets, and cities.
Today, we will be discussing these AI initiatives, international collaborations, and future technological objectives.
Welcome back to Primetime. Gunfire erupted outside the Israeli consulate building in Istanbul on Tuesday, prompting a swift response from security forces. Here's how the situation unfolded.
One attacker was killed and 2 others injured in an extended gun battle with police outside the building housing the Israeli consulate in Istanbul on Tuesday. Authorities said the exchange of fire lasted roughly 10 minutes near a permanent security checkpoint in the city's main financial district. Witnesses reported hearing sustained gunfire as police officers drew their weapons and took cover around security vehicles.
Gun sounds came, loudly. Then the sounds continued to increase. It lasted 15 to 20 minutes. We watched from the camera. The clash could be seen a little. Bullets hit the walls and everything. Then the police were going around inside. They were going up and down.
Footage showed an armed individual moving between parked police and security buses while firing an automatic rifle and handgun. 2 police officers were lightly wounded during the incident, according to Istanbul Governor Davut Gül. Interior Minister Mustafa Çiftçi said the 3 attackers had links to what he described as an organization that exploits religion, adding that 2 of them were brothers. The shooting took place just after midday near a major motorway, with gunfire echoing inside nearby office towers and bank headquarters during the lunch break. Officials confirmed that no Israeli diplomatic personnel were present at the consulate at the time. Governor Gül noted that Israeli staff had not been working at the building for roughly 2.5 years. Relations between Turkey and Israel cooled sharply after the Gaza war erupted in 2023, leading to the withdrawal of diplomats. Since then, a heavy police presence has been maintained around the consulate area due to security concerns. The Israeli foreign minister, meanwhile, has also confirmed that no staff were inside the building at the time of the incident. Authorities say the situation is now under control. This is Adam Mara for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
Well, to better understand this event, we're joined now by Ajmal Sahel, a senior counterterrorism and national security analyst from Berlin in Germany. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Mr. Sahel. It's very good to have you with us on Prime Time. I mean, putting the sort of geopolitics to one side for a moment and just zoning in on this as in terms of the mechanics of what's taken place. Typically, when these sorts of incidents happen, how is it that individuals go about being recruited? What sort of tends to happen in terms of the sequence of events?
Thank you very much for having me. So the recruitment process or model for such a scenario is hybrid. It's both digital, online, and also physical. So how digital it happens, of course, terrorist organization, they use the encrypted apps for, that there was a bunch of them that offer this possibility. And the second is, of course, the physical face-to-face. There are a bunch of the people who are meeting face-to-face and decide to plan such an attack. But from the operational point of view, it is a microcell. It should be a microcell like people of 2 or 4 people, and the majority of 4, and there should be around 2 people. And then they decide, they plan, and then they provide the materials or the logistics support and whatever is necessary, and they do it, and finally they decide to act.
And typically in the work that you've done, have you noticed that people use platforms that you and I might use, that our viewers might use every day, well-known social media tools, or is there a whole sort of range of networks and tools that the general public would just be unaware of?
So of course, that is what is the public, mail in exchange or platforms, and we have the same platforms operating through the dark web. So the dark web makes it possible that the 2 people are communicating with each other. They are not even known to each other. Probably by whatever means, but when someone is monitoring these digital platforms, and it would be difficult to find out who is talking to whom. This is the one possible. And secondly, even in a public domain, there are the platforms they are using. They use the encrypted system that could be very difficult to monitor or to find out or to track. And secondly, they use a specific terminology for, and it takes some time for counterterrorism activists or for counterterrorism forces that they could realize what this means, because it also makes it difficult from country to country, from region to region, probably for the counter-terrorist organizations in known specific words or specific terms, but in other areas there are different terms are used. So to know each and everything, that would be very difficult. And of course, everybody knows that no terrorist organization will use like they're ready to attack or something like that. But for all these have this specific terminology, and that really complicates the situation for the counterterrorism activists and also forces.
And Turkey, like many other advanced countries, has a sophisticated counterterrorism capability. Istanbul is predominantly a safe city, but how do these organizations or these individuals manage to occasionally circumnavigate that sort of situation?
So the first thing is the complexity, or again, as you said, to put aside the geopolitics of this attack, but still, the political complexity makes the situation more possible for any organization or any cell to operate. So diplomatically, you have to protect the Israeli embassy or Israeli consulate, which is predominantly, this is the part of the Israeli land, whether it is in the form of embassy or a consulate. Diplomatically, you have to protect it. But politically, for political gains, some of the politicians, they say, for example, they criticize Israel. And this make it possible for a lot of locally radicalized or transnational terrorist cells to be inspired by these sort of narrative. when the state of the country says that Israel is a terrorist country, or Israel is, how can I say, in relation to Palestine, or in relation to Iran, or in general in relation to the Islamic world, and you criticize this, you give this possibility, or indirectly you inspire, indirectly you encourage your own citizens to stand up against the Israeli as a country or as a nation, and then make it possible for sort of attack. But nonetheless, there are all the time a blind spot left. Of course, I know that the security is very tight. There are some checkpoints. There are CCTV cameras on. But despite all of these things, it is known to everybody that Israeli installation would be attacked, and specifically Turkey, because Turkey is already chosen as an operational arena for a bunch of the terrorist organizations. Why? Because the first thing is, it is as a NATO country, as a member states of the NATO, it is a symbolic movement here, or point exists. And the second is the Israeli. However, as you said, and everybody knows that the consulate is not operating. Probably there would be some technical staff there, but there's no diplomat, there's no political attaché, there's nobody at all. But still, it is done against that. Why? Because it is symbolically shows that in any sort of attack against Israeli, wherever there is Israeli flag or Israeli institutions, that is the image. This is against the image of the Israeli. How the hate environment is developed against Israel, even not only inside Israel, not only in the region, even in European country, Israeli institutions, Israeli installation, and even the Jewish institutions are attacked. And this shows the symbolic act that they hate against the Israeli government and the Israeli policy in the world.
Yeah, I suppose, Ajmal, like many other countries, Turkey must, I guess, expect to be able to hold positions, to allow its citizens to have different views without the fear necessarily of terrorism or violence, just like in Europe, just like in the UK and in other parts of the world. What are the key warning signs or vulnerabilities that governments, security services are looking for, do you think, to prevent these incidents in the future?
You know that the psychologists, say is an emotion. Behind each emotion is a strong feeling. So the counter-terrorist organizations, particularly in Turkey, they should develop model of pre-emotions, which is when they should monitor the change of a style. When they see, when they simply monitor that someone is suddenly changing their style, or tracking weapons, so from one place to another, or suddenly someone is buying weapons or interested in shooting. And then, of course, these are the physical things that one could do. And the other thing is, all these platforms, they have to monitor it vigorously and actively, that the communication is between the people, or there is a sort of revenge or a sort of slogans, things like that. They have to monitor and filter each and everything to keep on. And the other thing is, as I said, of course, the checkpoints, they have to have the permanent checkpoints in the areas, and then they have to have this establish more CCTV cameras, and also controlled access to the area. When an area is really sensitive, there should be controlled access to that. Not everybody is allowed maybe there would be a person is not armed, well, the person is not suspicious, looks not so suspicious, but you have to keep the record. And secondly, a sudden car rental happens, or logistics which are predominantly used in sort of attack. So you have to keep on that, and also the nexus between the organized criminals and the terrorist organizations. So all these things that one should monitor, and when you, give more possibility or more position to such sort of activities, then it may lessen or it make it less possible for terrorist organization to operate in such a target and choose such a target.
Very interesting analysis. Ajmal Sohail, we thank you very much indeed for joining us on Prime Time. Okay, after the break, we'll take a look at the remaining news from around the world. Do stay with us.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
Defense technologies, artificial intelligence, and digital security are advancing rapidly on an international scale.
Avelsan has designed and delivered simulators of numerous military aircrafts, helicopters, and aerial platforms. From airports to stadiums, hospitals to factories, wherever video meets complexity, we add intelligence. In short, we do not merely manage videos, we turn video into decisions that protect people, assets, and cities.
Today, we will be discussing these AI initiatives, international collaborations, and future technological objectives.
As America sleeps, Europe is waking, and the East has begun its day. A News is right here at the center, bringing you the latest stories as they break. I'm Nadia Jani, here with you each weekday morning to share latest world news and the stories shaping our region. Across all platforms and wherever you get your news, we explore the context behind the big headlines. Live from Baku, I bring you a diverse mix of regional and international news, sport and politics for you, an audience that wants a bit more. So join me Monday to Friday for the latest headlines, expert analysis and live updates from around the world. Around the globe and live from Baku, this is Daybreak here on A News.
Unfiltered news and analysis from the region and beyond. From Washington to Beijing, Tehran to Kabul, to Tbilisi to Tashkent. Hello, I'm Jay. Challenges.
Today is the third.
We're with you 24/7, taking you live to the front lines of the day's biggest stories. Welcome to Gaza. One important note to this. I'm here.
Azerbaijan and Armenia.
Hello, we are reporting on the 8th of November.
Dar es Salaam, Tel Aviv, Washington, London,
Moscow,
Kyiv, Berlin,
Rio de Janeiro, Beijing, Bangkok, Tbilisi, Tashkent, Almaty, Kazakhstan, Port Sudan, Tehran, Islamabad, Istanbul,
Kabul, Port Aienu.
Welcome back to Primetime Now. Let's look at some of the stories around the world. One of Australia's most decorated soldiers has been charged with war crime offences linked to the Afghanistan conflict. Our next report takes a closer look at the allegations.
Australia's most decorated living veteran has been charged with 5 counts of war crime murder. Police say the 47-year-old former Special Air Service soldier is accused of killing 5 unarmed Afghans in Uruzgan province between 2009 and 2012.
Good afternoon. A former Australian Defence Force member has today been arrested and will be charged with 5 counts of war crime murder after a joint investigation between the Office of the Special Investigator and the AFP.
Prosecutors allege the victims were detained, unarmed, and not taking part in hostilities at the time. If convicted, he faces a maximum sentence of life imprisonment. The case makes him the second Australian veteran of the Afghanistan campaign to be charged with a war crime. Authorities say more than 50 investigations into alleged war crimes by Australian forces have been launched, with several cases still ongoing. The arrest follows a 2020 military inquiry that found evidence Australian Special Forces unlawfully killed 39 Afghan prisoners, farmers, and other non-combatants.
The alleged conduct related to these charges is confined to a very small section of our trusted and respected ADF, which helps keep this country safe. The overwhelming majority of our ADF do our country proud. Today's charges are not reflective of the majority members who serve under our Australian flag with honour, with distinction, and with the values of a democratic nation.
Police have not named the suspect, but Australian media have identified him as Ben Robert Smith, one of the country's most decorated soldiers. Robert Smith was hailed as a national hero after being awarded several top military honours, including the Victoria Cross for his service in Afghanistan.
Well, as we've been hearing, tensions are rising over one of the world's most critical shipping routes, with global powers now stepping in to try and prevent further escalation. Our next report looks at how diplomatic efforts are unfolding at the United Nations.
The United Nations Security Council is set to vote on a revised resolution to protect commercial shipping through the Strait of Hormuz after earlier proposals faced strong opposition. Led by Bahrain, initial plans included authorizing the use of force to safeguard vessels. However, that proposal was dropped following resistance from China and Russia. The latest draft urges countries to coordinate defensive measures, including escorting commercial vessels, to keep this vital energy route secure and prevent any disruption to international shipping.
We are confident that this draft resolution is consistent with international law and with the provisions of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, which guarantees the right of transit passage through straits without obstruction, contrary to what Iran is doing today. We look forward to a unified position from this esteemed council during the vote that will take place on the draft resolution.
Diplomats say the revised version is more likely to pass, though uncertainty remains. It needs at least 9 votes and no veto from the 5 permanent members: Britain, China, Russia, France, and the United States. China has warned that allowing force could worsen tensions. Foreign Minister Wang Yi has instead urged a ceasefire, calling it the only viable path to stability. Meanwhile, Iran is moving to formalize what it calls its sovereignty and legitimacy over the strait, with Parliament preparing new legislation.
The Islamic Consultative Assembly is determined to pass a law regarding the exercise of sovereignty and legitimacy over the Strait of Hormuz. We are holding very intensive meetings with the respected sponsors of the proposal and the relevant parliamentary commissions, and coordinating with other relevant authorities. This issue will soon be raised in the open session of Parliament, the votes of the honourable members will be taken, and with the coordination of the respected Guardian Council it will become law. The law will certainly be enforced in the Strait of Hormuz by the Islamic Republic of Iran.
The stakes are significant. Any disruption to the strait has already pushed up global energy prices and is having a knock-on effect across the Middle East.
Violence has flared again in central Gaza, raising fresh concerns about the stability of the ceasefire. Our next report looks at how a localized incident quickly escalated on the ground.
At least 10 Palestinians have been killed in Israeli airstrikes and clashes involving Hamas and an Israel-backed militia in central Gaza, according to local sources. The violence took place east of the Maghazi refugee camp, where witnesses said militia members had set up a checkpoint before coming under attack from Hamas security personnel. The situation quickly escalated into armed clashes, with Israeli drones reportedly carrying out strikes on Hamas fighters in several locations. Health officials at Al-Aqsa Hospital in Deir al-Balah said the bodies of at least 10 people were brought in from the scene, with dozens more wounded, some in critical condition. It remains unclear how many casualties were caused by the airstrikes and how many resulted from the fighting on the ground. Meanwhile, the head of the World Health Organization said a contractor working with the agency was killed during a security incident in Gaza. Following this, medical evacuations through the Rafah crossing into Egypt have been suspended until further notice. Residents said the confrontation began after the militia allegedly attempted to detain people near a school, sheltering displaced civilians.
It was known that the militias stationed along the yellow line were advancing and retreating daily. However, we were surprised when their advance was direct. They reached the homes of some residents and opened fire directly on them.
During the clashes, missiles struck a densely populated area, raising concerns about civilian casualties. There was no immediate response from the Israeli military or Hamas. Separate reports from across Gaza later on Monday brought the total death toll to at least 12, according to medics. The developments come amid a fragile ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, with both sides accusing each other of repeated violations.
Around 40 trucks blocked a highway near Nantes in western France as construction workers demanded urgent measures to curb rising fuel costs, threatening their jobs. Well, many say soaring diesel prices driven by the conflict in the Middle East are hitting their businesses hard, raising fears of layoffs in the coming months. Protesters handed out leaflets to drivers to explain the roadblock, highlighting the impact of cash flow and company savings. A French high-speed train collided with a truck carrying military equipment at a level crossing near Calais, killing the train driver. Authorities say, according to the local prefecture and railways operators, 13 people were injured, 2 of them critically. Now, the incident happened at around 7 a.m. near Lille as the train was travelling from Dunkirk to Paris, with disruptions expected to continue throughout the day. In southern Lebanon, an artist in Tyre is using graffiti to transform buildings damaged by Israeli strikes into symbols of resilience.
In Lebanon's southern city of Tyre, a local artist is painting on walls damaged by Israeli strikes, turning rubble into messages of resilience. Surrounded by debris and shattered buildings, Mohammed Younes sprays colour onto cracked concrete, adding flowers and words across damaged homes.
I'm painting a picture, painting on a ruined wall. Art is a message. It reflects the spirit of human commitment. We are dedicated to this art because it's a message, a cause. I wanted to combine the letter and colour with the destruction.
His work appears among piles of rubble, where entire neighbourhoods have been damaged in recent weeks.
We are drawing joy for our families, so that when they return and see that despite all this brutality and destruction, the enemy's brutality has not deterred us.
The conflict has disrupted daily life across the area, with schools and universities no longer operating normally. Younes, who has worked as an art teacher for decades, says painting has become a way to respond, as many normal routines have come to a halt. He says he hopes other artists will also come and paint across damaged areas, offering a sense of presence in places where normal life has been interrupted.
I call on all artists, painters and calligraphers to come to southern Lebanon, to the homeland, to visit the sites of destruction and paint.
According to Lebanese authorities, Israeli strikes since early March have killed more than 1,400 people and displaced more than 1 million across much of Lebanon. Israel says the strikes are in response to cross-border attacks by Hezbollah.
US Vice President J.D. Vance and Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán speaking during joint statements underlined closer ties. Mr. Orbán warned Europe faces a deepening energy crisis and stressed the importance of US-Hungarian cooperation, while Mr. Vance framed the partnership as a joint effort to defend Western values, including family, security and national identity. The visit of Vice President Vance comes as Prime Minister Viktor Orbán approaches the country's election on April the 12th. The two men are set to attend a campaign rally in what Hungary's foreign minister has described as a historic trip, the first visit by a US vice president since 1991.
Europe is heading toward the most serious energy crisis in its history. We are seeing sharp price increases, and if we do not act in time, shortages of energy, oil and gas could emerge. In this situation, US-Hungarian energy cooperation is especially important. Without it, we could not guarantee Hungary's energy security or maintain reduced utility costs. We also spoke about the United States peace efforts. Hungary has always supported the United States and President Donald Trump in this regard. We have been living in the shadow of war for 4 years, and we are convinced that if Donald Trump had been President of the United States, this war would not have broken out. And if Europeans, more precisely Brussels, were not obstructing his peace efforts, peace in Ukraine could have already been achieved. I also informed the President that Hungary is experiencing unusually harsh and open foreign intelligence interference in its electoral processes. In this context, we greatly appreciate and welcome the decisions of the US President to end American financial interference in the political processes of other countries.
What the United States and Hungary together represent under Viktor's leadership and under President Trump's leadership is the defense of Western civilization, the defense of the idea that children should be able to go to school and get educated and not indoctrinated, the defense of the idea that European and American families should be able to transport themselves and be able to afford to heat and cool their homes, a defense of the idea that we are founded on a certain Christian civilization and Christian values that animate everything from freedom of speech to rule of law to respect for minority rights and protection of the vulnerable.
Pope Leo XIV is scheduled to make an historic, unprecedented visit to Algeria from April the 13th to the 15th as the first stop on his apostolic journey to Africa.
Residents of Algiers expressed their optimism about the upcoming historical visit by Pope Leo XIV, who is expected to meet members of Algeria's Christian community during a 3-day trip to the country.
I think that the Pope's upcoming visit is a very good thing, not only for Algeria, but for all nations, because it encourages friendly and fraternal communication between different religions.
The visit of the Pope to Algiers is a positive step to show the whole world that in this country there are no conflicts between religions. It highlights that there is freedom and democracy in the practice of religion, that all religions are respected, and that everyone is free to practice their faith without imposing it on others.
The city is ramping up preparations ahead of the Pope's visit, with work already well underway. Municipal crews are repainting walls and polishing statues across key areas. At the Basilica of Our Lady of Africa in Algiers, workers have been seen refreshing the exterior and surrounding grounds in anticipation of the visit.
A man who will once again encourage us in our faith and in our mission to build a new world, a world where there is peace and where people live together in harmony. And here, at the heart of the Basilica, I find myself at the very heart of that shared life and fellowship, where there is no distinction and everyone lives in perfect unity.
According to the official Vatican News website, this will be the third journey of Pope Leo outside Italy since the beginning of his pontificate, and he will be travelling to Algeria, Cameroon, Angola and Equatorial Guinea.
And it's something Africa's largest refinery has now taken action on by stepping up exports as global supply disruptions linked to the Iran war continue to impact energy and food markets.
Dangote Group says its refinery in Lagos, the largest in Africa, is ramping up exports of gasoline and urea fertilizer to countries across the continent facing supply shortages. Chairman Aliko Dangote said shipments have increased in recent days as buyers turn to alternative sources amid ongoing disruptions.
The challenges are many. One is of urea, which is fertilizer that we have. I think in the last couple of days we've been loading to mostly African countries, which we are not doing before. And then now is to do with also petroleum products, which are now sending mainly to African countries.
Operating at full capacity of around 650,000 barrels per day, the refinery has shipped about 17 cargoes of gasoline across Africa, while urea exports have also risen, supported by annual production capacity of up to 3 million metric tons. During a visit by Amina Mohammed, officials highlighted the facility's role in easing pressure on fuel and fertilizer supplies. The United Nations says increased output could help limit the risk of a wider food security crisis.
I think the UN's job here is to amplify and to put visibility on the possibilities of mitigating a food security crisis, and this is one of them. I hope that when we go back, that we can continue to talk to the partners that will partner, the countries that should partner with the Dangote industries.
However, fuel prices in Nigeria remain at record highs due to elevated global crude costs, with Dangote saying the refinery is seeking more locally priced crude to help reduce prices.
A major explosion has shut the Bridge of the Americas in Panama City after a fuel tanker caught fire at a nearby depot. One person has been killed and several others injured. At least one person has been reported missing. Well, the blast happened in the La Boca area when multiple tankers caught fire beneath the bridge, sending flames across the roadway. Authorities closed the crossing while engineers inspect possible structural damage. The cause of the fire is under investigation, with results expected once safety checks are complete. Bilateral trade between Georgia and Azerbaijan continues to show steady growth, with new sectors offering opportunities for expansion. Our Deputy Editor-in-Chief, Orkan Amashov, asked David Aspuri, General Director of the Chamber of Commerce and Industry of Georgia, about the current state of cooperation and future potential.
According to Georgian figures, the bilateral trade turnover stands at $1.1 billion US. Azerbaijani estimates are different. They say $880 million US. Do you think this figure, in a pure mathematical sense of this word, reflect the potentiality of the bilateral relationship between these two nations?
I think there are much more that might be done in the future, and that is understandable that when we speak about certain reservations, we mean not only trade. Trade is a traditional, it's a sector of cooperation and definitely important one. But I think that there are so many new fields of cooperation, like green economy, like digital economy, and the well-known energy sector, and some other, let's say, new fields. And there are new stories, of course, of that in this respect, But I would say that now we have a model based on a bilateral, I would say, segment of cooperation, and multilateral or regional or global, I would say. And in terms of the trends of the world's development today, politics, economics, I think there's a certain, I would say, domination, a bit of participation of both countries in global and large-scale projects today, but doesn't mean that we're not cooperating. Again, I'm saying at bilateral level today. So, in terms of bilateral, say, agenda, we have to say that there is an increase of export. There's also an increase in import. We have very positive dynamics. The turnover is better this year. Almost raised, maybe it's not a very impressive figure, but dynamics is very good if we take into account the global risks today, and what is happening in the world today. So still we cooperate very interestingly in the field of energy, as I mentioned it, and there's also positive dynamics, but I think investments are also increasing today. I'm not going into details that in terms of ranking of both countries in mutual trade or investments, but dynamics definitely are very positive.
Okay, after the break, we check in with our A-News correspondents around the world for the very latest developments in their regions. Do stay with us. On World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption.
As America sleeps, Europe is waking, and the East has begun its day. A-News is right here at the center, bringing you the latest stories as they break. I'm Nadia Jani, here with you each weekday morning to share latest world news and the stories shaping our region. Across all platforms and wherever you get your news, we explore the context behind the big headlines. Live from Baku, I bring you a diverse mix of regional and international news, sport and politics for you, an audience that wants a bit more. So join me Monday to Friday for the latest headlines, expert analysis and live updates from around the world. Around the globe and live from Baku, this is Daybreak here on A-News.
Defense technologies, artificial intelligence, and digital security are advancing rapidly on an international scale.
Avelsan has designed and delivered simulators of numerous military aircrafts, helicopters, and aerial platforms. From airports to stadiums, hospitals to factories, wherever video meets complexity, we add intelligence. In short, we do not merely manage videos, we turn video into decisions that protect people, assets, and cities.
Today, we will be discussing these AI initiatives, international collaborations, and future technological objectives.
Welcome to A News, unfiltered news and analysis from the region and beyond. From Washington to Beijing, Tehran to Kabul, to Tbilisi to Tashkent. Hello, I'm Jay. That's challenging.
Today is the third.
We're with you 24/7, taking you live to the front lines of the day's biggest stories.
Welcome to Gaza. One important note to this. I'm here.
Azerbaijan and Armenia.
Hello, we are reporting on the 28th of November.
Reporting from Paris,
Dar es Salaam, Tel Aviv,
Washington,
London,
Moscow,
Kyiv, Berlin,
Rio de Janeiro,
Beijing,
Bangkok, Tbilisi,
Tashkent, Almaty, Kazakhstan, Port Sudan,
Tehran,
Islamabad,
Istanbul,
Kabul for A News.
Welcome back to Primetime. Now let's get more from those A News correspondents around the world. US President Donald Trump has warned Iran of severe military action if it rejects his proposed deal, including strikes on key infrastructure. Let's go to our Washington correspondent now, Ube Sharbanda.
President Trump says that he is ready to implement a military plan that would decimate every bridge in Iran, in addition to destroying all of the country's power plants if Iranian leadership do not agree to a deal. Negotiations with Tehran are still ongoing, but time is quickly running out for the Iranians to accept President Trump's proposal to end the conflict by opening the Strait of Hormuz and agreeing to discuss the removal of highly enriched uranium. According to reports in Washington, Vice President J.D. Vance is on standby to step into the U.S.-Iranian negotiations if the talks escalate to direct high-level meetings. During a press conference on Monday, President Trump said that the U.S.-Israeli bombing campaign has the support of the Iranian people, and that heavy strikes will continue. Israel is reportedly waiting for authorization from Washington to begin striking Iran's energy facilities, and that could cripple Iran's ability to export oil and gas. President Trump also said that he does not support the use of Kurdish separatist militias to fight against Iran's Revolutionary Guards. Trump and his chief military advisor, General Kane, told reporters that the recent rescue mission of a downed pilot and a weapons systems officer in Iran involved 155 separate aircraft. One of the rescue helicopters received damage from small arms fire from Iran. The director of the Central Intelligence Agency, John Ratcliffe, who was with President Trump during the press briefing on Monday, said that he believed that the Iranian authorities were, quote, embarrassed and ultimately humiliated by the success of this rescue mission. President Trump reiterated his threat that the entire country of Iran could be taken out in one night, and that night could be this evening. While Secretary of War Pete Hegseth also warned Iran to, quote, choose wisely, referencing President Trump's actions in killing Iranian top General Qasem Soleimani and the former Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Khamenei. I'm Ube Shabander, A News, Washington.
To the UK now, and resident doctors across England have begun their longest strike yet, raising fresh concerns about pressure on the NHS as disruption is expected to build in the days ahead.
Resident doctors across England have begun their longest strike yet, walking out for 6 days after rejecting the government's final pay offer. The action started this morning and will run until the 13th of April through the Easter holiday period, raising concerns about disruption across the NHS. Resident doctors, formerly called junior doctors, make up nearly half of the medical workforce in the NHS. Talks collapsed after a 48-hour ultimatum from Prime Minister Keir Starmer expired without agreement. In response, the government has withdrawn a pledge to fund 1,000 additional specialty training posts that had been tied to the deal. The British Medical Association, representing around 55,000 resident doctors, says the offer fails to address years of pay erosion and staffing pressures. Under the proposal, doctors would receive a 3.5% pay rise this year, with total increase of around 35% over 3 years, alongside reimbursements for mandatory exam fees. But the union argues the investment is not enough and says concerns remain about how workforce reforms and new training courses will be delivered. Health Secretary Wes Streeting has defended the deal as the most generous pay uplift for any public sector group under the current government. He warned the NHS cannot afford further concessions, estimating the strike could cost around £50 million a day, roughly £300 million over the full 6-day period. Streeting also criticised the union for rejecting the deal without putting forward an alternative, insisting the offer doesn't get better than this. Meanwhile, the BMA says strike action is a last resort, arguing that without a credible and enforceable deal, doctors have been left with no other option. This marks the latest escalation in a long-running dispute over pay and conditions, with more than a dozen rounds of industrial action taking place since 2023. Health leaders say emergency care will continue, but patients are being warned to expect delays and disruption to routine services. Zaina Farizadeh, A-News, Manchester, United Kingdom.
Public opinion in Spain is shifting as Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez's socialists gain support in recent polls. For more now, our correspondent Anita Sharma in the Netherlands has the details.
Welcome to This Day in Europe, where 2 new surveys suggest rising support for Spain's ruling socialists led by Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez. This comes after Sanchez took one of the strongest anti-war positions in the West on the U.S.-Israeli conflict with Iran. A Sigma Dose poll for El Mundo shows support for the socialists climbing to 27.7%. That's up from 26.4% last month, narrowing the lead of the Conservative People's Party. A separate survey for El País puts the socialists even higher at 28.6%. Meanwhile, support for the far-right Vox Party, which backs the military campaign, is slipping. Public sentiment is a key driver here. A recent survey found 85% of Spaniards opposed the war, giving Sanchez political cover to go further than most European leaders. And he has. Madrid closed its airspace to U.S. military aircraft involved in the strikes and blocked the use of joint bases in southern Spain, a highly unusual move for a NATO ally. Sanchez has framed the war as illegal and economically damaging, warning that every bomb ultimately hits European households through higher energy costs. But what sets Spain apart is how isolated that stance is within Europe. While some EU leaders have voiced concern, most, including France and Germany, have avoided direct confrontation with Washington, opting instead for a more cautious, alliance-preserving approach. That leaves Spain as an outlier and potentially a disruptor. Spain's stance may be delivering political gains at home, but it's also testing how much divergence the EU, and especially NATO, can absorb. When it comes to war and peace, it's no longer a question about unity, but how much disagreement the bloc can withstand. As for the alliance, the urgency is growing, especially amid increasingly anti-NATO rhetoric coming straight out of the White House. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in Arnhem, Netherlands.
A new legislative initiative in Georgia is drawing attention as the government moves to tighten rules around mandatory military service. Our correspondent brings more now from Tbilisi.
The Ministry of Defense of Georgia has submitted a draft law to Parliament that targets citizens living abroad who are subject to conscription. The proposal comes amid concerns that some individuals are avoiding compulsory service by remaining outside the country. Under the proposed changes, Georgian citizens who receive a draft notice while living abroad will be required to return to Georgia within a reasonable time frame and appear before the Conscription Commission. The bill also introduces stricter notification rules. Even if a conscript does not physically receive a summons, they will still be held legally responsible. In such cases, the notice will be published on the official website of the relevant authority within 2 working days and will be considered officially delivered after 7 days. From that point, the individual will have 10 calendar days to report to the appropriate body responsible for military registration or conscription. Additionally, the draft law will define which family members are authorized to receive draft notifications on behalf of the conscript. The initiative is widely seen as a response to a growing tendency among eligible individuals to avoid mandatory military service by staying abroad or evading contact with authorities. The bill is scheduled for its first reading at the Defense Committee, where lawmakers will begin formal discussions. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, A News.
South Korea is looking to secure alternative oil supplies as instability in the Middle East begins to disrupt key global routes. Kazakhstan is now emerging as a potential partner as efforts to stabilize energy flows intensifies. Our A News correspondent Fariza Kalamazina sent us this report.
South Korea is moving to secure alternative oil supplies as disruptions in the Middle East begin to affect key global routes, and Kazakhstan is now coming into focus as a potential partner, according to Reuters. A senior envoy of the South Korean president is expected to arrive in Astana for talks on oil supplies. The visit is part of a wider regional effort that also includes Saudi Arabia and Oman, as Seoul looks to reduce risks and secure more stable energy flows. The urgency comes from growing instability around the Strait of Hormuz, a route that normally handles about 20% of global oil trade. And South Korea remains highly dependent on this route, with around 60% of its oil imports passing through the strait. According to Reuters, authorities have already introduced energy-saving measures and are urging businesses and households to cut consumption while working to secure longer-term supply agreements. South Korea is not the only country now looking at alternative sources, including Kazakh oil. Similar concerns are emerging in Japan, where more than 90% of oil imports come from the Middle East. Japanese energy company INPEX is considering redirecting part of its supplies from Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan to the domestic market, as we reported earlier. But for Japan, rerouting supplies around the Strait of Hormuz can take up to 55 days instead of about 20, increasing costs and putting additional pressure on global energy markets. Fariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, A News.
After the break, history in space as NASA's Artemis II crew breaks a decades-old record and ventures farther than any humans before. Don't go away.